Hello, this is Mark Smith with Family Tree Counseling Associates, and I'm going to be speaking today on the 8 flavors of counterdependency and codependency. This is probably the most popular article I've ever written in terms of people in our waiting room grabbing the blue sheets off the wall and bringing them home and reading them. Counterdependency is something that is not as known in the culture as codependency. Just think of counterdependency as the opposite of codependency. And most people aren't purely 100% counterdependent or purely 100% codependent. They're a combination. So many years ago, I wrote an article about these 8 flavors, and basically there's 4 continuums, and there's 8 flavors in that one person might have 1 quality from a counterdependent side and 3 from codependent, or 2 and 2, or 3 codependent, 1 counterdependent. So some of them they're not meant to be disrespectful. I've gotten a little bit of blowback from that through the years, and that's not the intention at all. They're meant to be cute and to have a little fun while we're learning. When I go to Starbucks, this was back during my low-carb days, I would ask for a decaf breve venti latte. I knew the code words to string them together. I don't know if that's in the right sequence for the official Starbucks barrister language, but that's what I called it. So basically, I'm gonna come up with flavors, and the first one is Macho Donald Trump 100% counterdependence. Decaf breve venti latte. So a macho Donald Trump 100% counterdependent. These folks are frequently called other names. It starts with A, and there's 3 letters, and then there's another, I guess, I don't know if it's the same word or 2 words, starts with an H, and it's 4 letters. And it's not a very nice word, so use your imagination. Stereotypically, these are, but not always, these are white, middle-class, mid-40 males, or mid-50 males, like me. And he would exude a great deal of confidence. Not that women can't, or certainly many other races can't have a great deal of confidence. I'm talking about your stereotype counterdependent in our culture, Donald Trump. His confidence goes over the line into arrogance and grandiosity. He's highly independent. He does what he wants when he wants to. And he bucks any kind of and resents any form of accountability. A good picture of a 100% counterdependent in recent years was depicted in a movie along these lines was Steve Jobs, one of my heroes. He really resented authority. He fought it, and unfortunately was kicked out of his own company for a period of time because he resisted accountability so much. A 100% Donald Trump counterdependent is oblivious as to how his abrasive personality impacts people, and he's abrasive to the needs of people close to him. He's very self-centered by nature. He didn't get his needs met growing up, and he learned that if he didn't take care of his needs, nobody was going to. So there's a lot of times a lot of judgment about a counterdependent male being self-absorbed, but it's learned behavior. It's survivalism. He generally has a very addictive personality, with workaholism generally being at the top of the list. Other favorites of a pure counterdependent in terms of addictions include control, sex, alcohol, adrenaline, money, possessions, and power. He does tend to be extremely controlling, partially because he had very little control growing up. He grew up in chaos, and he grew up not having a voice, and he determined that he was going to have control of his life when he was an adult and could control his life. He doesn't like surprises, and he hates the feeling of being out of control, so he orders his life in such a way that he rarely feels out of control. So a counterdependent, they're very competent seeming, but they grew up with parents that were not very competent, who were unstable and lacking in their ability to provide stability for their children. I hear a lot about this guy during therapy sessions. He seems to be everybody's boss. These guys tend to be the boss. At home, he's married to wife number 3, because wife number 1, the first 2 eventually got too angry to put up with his many unloving traits. He makes a lot of money, he accomplishes great things, he builds empires. And you want him on your side during a fight or during a war. He fancies himself as Tom Cruise, General Patton, Superman, and Donald Trump and John Wayne all rolled into one. As a father, many times he deludes himself into thinking that he's a great dad because twice he coached the soccer team. But the truth is, he really doesn't have time for his children. This gentleman needs to be humbled, and he needs to be broken. He needs to discover that he's just a fragile human being, like the rest of us. Many times he takes either a near divorce or a major professional setback or a life-threatening illness or legal problems or the death of a loved one or the mellowing effect of old age to melt his defenses and to be less counterdependent. But unless his fanny is in some sort of frying pan, we rarely see this guy down at the therapy office. His wife and kids come, and they end up spending a lot of time doing a lot of work. So there's your number 1 flavor. Number 2 flavor, Doris Day on steroids. Excuse me. This would be a very sweet, insecure, dependent, other-centered, passive, codependent woman who's taken so much crap through the years that she eventually develops into a very bitter, seething, angry, raging, controlling, critical woman who's on a mission to exact her pound of flesh from every man who makes the mistake of involving himself with her. She feels as if she's been victimized by men and by life, and she has not been, however. Basically, she grew up being overly controlled and shamed, which molded her into being codependent and into being a relationship doormat. She then unconsciously but deliberately chose a string of men who were also by nature both controlling and critical. Rather than using the marriage as an opportunity to grow, she snaps one day and then tries to use counterdependency as a shield to protect herself from the world taking advantage of her codependency. In other words, she was way over here being codependent, and bullied by the counterdependents, and she sort of, you can't beat them, you join them. So she jumps all the way over here and becomes pretty counterdependent herself. So she figures if you can't beat them, join them. I warn my oblivious counterdependent men that their sweet codependent wives are ticking time bombs. Many times a codependent, it just takes time to move from not having a sense of self. Think of a triangle with the top of the triangle is not having a voice, not having power, not having a sense of self. The second point in the triangle is resentment is building. And then the third point in the triangle is emotional cutoff and rage and criticism, because that person has changed. They've gone from being mousy and quiet to being pugilistic and punishing. So they go from I'm a victim of the bad men to I'm responsible for my choices, and I've never been victimized by a man in relationship. That's somebody in recovery. And I pick men like my dad in an unconscious effort to work on those unresolved issues with him. So that's what these codependent who've become bitter women sound like when they get in recovery. They connect their choices to either their dad or their mom or both growing up, and they realize they have not been victimized. Such a paradigm shift creates a tremendous change in Doris, and it opens up her soft side, and it makes her feel her non-victim-like pain. The third flavor I called a sickeningly needy counterdependent. So I wrote many years ago, yuck, my stomach gets a little queasy just thinking about these guys. So in this example, it's a fella. This would be a pure counterdependent with just enough crack in his defenses to have him feel his desperate abandonment issues. His mother and or his father abandoned him as a child, and he's famished for love, touch, affection, praise, acceptance, connection, and sex. He generally focuses all of his primitive neediness on his significant other, not unlike how a little duckling imprints on the mama duck during the very first moments of hatching. He's clingy, he's victimy, he's whiny, he's smothering, he's demanding, he's pouty, and he's insanely jealous. If a breakup occurs, he'll stalk the object of his affection. In a worst case scenario, he's the kind of guy you read about in the paper. You know, he brings harm to his former wife and to himself. His brand of love is very needy and very unhealthy. He's addicted to his relationship, but he doesn't really know her, and he doesn't really want her to be a separate person. She's there to meet his very considerable needs, sexual and otherwise. And this guy needs to have an epiphany regarding just how ugly and unattractive and ineffective his over-neediness is. He needs to get beyond himself and get his focus on studying exactly who his spouse really is and who they are as a person. And he needs to learn how to truly love, and he needs to heal his childhood abandonment needs. And no relationship should be under the pressure of having to meet too many infantile dependency needs. One of my articles that I've written through the years was about healthy neediness being the glue that holds a marriage together. With neediness, what you're looking for is like the three bears. Not too much and not too little. You want just right. Because if you have not enough neediness, then nobody's asking for anything and nobody connects. But if you get too much neediness, then you get this, sickening over neediness, abandonment, stalkerish, pouty kind of love. Better move on. I'm at 15 minutes. Number 4, sweetie pie wouldn't hurt a fly. This is the across-the-board codependent, and they're very insecure about a whole host of issues like self-esteem and self-worth and professional confidence. They tend to be in relationships where they're dependent on a man financially. They live to serve others. They do not even seem capable of a mean thought or deed. This lady would be more prevalent in the 50s than today. Edith Bunker comes to mind. Generally, women have been empowered enough in our society to know they have every right to relationship equality. Counter-dependent 54-year-old men marries a beautiful 100% codependent 32-year-old trophy wife because she hasn't developed her assertiveness yet. But it doesn't take too many years until these codependents get in touch with their anger. That's why they married a strong father figure controlling counter-dependent to work on resolving their issues with such a strong figure from their previous generation. Flavor number 5, white knight rescuers. This is a strong counter-dependent who is so driven by their need to rescue a damsel in distress that they become other-centered and they simply forget to protect themselves, or they don't have the capacity to protect themselves. And many times they are just drawn toward a damsel in distress and they lose themselves. I really could write a whole book on this topic. Many times counter-dependents, they're out of touch with their own childhood pain, their own vulnerabilities. They have no memory of them. They don't cry about their own pain. But when they see this woman crying, they feel their own buried pain, and they cry when the woman cries. I wanted to ask a counter-dependent, what are your needs? And he said, I need to be needed. And I said, that's not a need. The relationship then begins with him having all the power, all the competency, the money, and she exchanges looks and her body and the irresistible attracting power of her emotional pain. I've often said that rescuing has gotten almost as many people together as sex has. He would do anything to help her, including marrying her. It is only not too long after the wedding that he discovers she is actually many times not quite as helpless as he thought she was, but in fact that she has some characteristics of an emotional terrorist. Over the years, the table turns, and he's reduced to a fearful errand boy who stumbles all over himself in his effort to try to please the unpleasable. This fellow needs to gain a clue as to what was hurtful in his childhood and resolve that. If he continues to go through life with his white knight illusion, he is actually walking around buck naked with a ring in his nose that can be pulled by any damsel in distress who crosses his path. Flavor number 6, the guy with the most toys wins. This is a strong counter-dependent whose walls are down in the area of insecurity. His need to be grandiose is actually a reaction to his deep-seated feelings of not really being good enough, just as he is. So he desperately needs the latest, the greatest, the biggest, has to have a big TV, bigger than the next guy, a brand new car, big house, pretty wife, the best things to prove and validate his significance. He was not given enough unconditional love in his childhood. Love is a competition. Everything's a competition. He can't stand to lose at anything. Possessions aren't blessings to be enjoyed. They're trophies to be displayed. His worst nightmare is to be seen as a failure. He is especially miserable when a brother, a friend, a neighbor is seen as more successful or more prosperous. This guy misses out on relationships. He's too busy competing in the game of life to have time for his wife, his kids, for God, for friendships. He needs to heal his childhood wound of parental lack of acceptance. He would also be much happier if he learned to accept himself just as he was. The ironic thing is that his obsession with getting ahead oftentimes is the thing that gets him behind. Between expensive divorces and high credit card rates, he knows what it's like to be very squeezed. Flavor number 7, knock knock, nobody's home. This condition is a little rarer than some of the others. It is a codependent that is so oblivious and self-absorbed and addictive that they almost seem autistic, like they're in their own world. They just aren't quite all there. They're blank, they're numb, maybe a little ditzy. Favorite addictions including reading romance novels, buying presents for other people, eating, work, volunteering, religion, collecting massive numbers of pets. They might be seen as maybe having a touch of Asperger's. If it's women, these women don't have a lot of relationships, and many times they've never had children. They're almost always on some kind of antidepressant, and they rarely stick in therapy for very long. They've been hurt so much in relationships that they've sort of given up, and this is everybody's favorite aunt. These women need to be awakened in their anger and awakened to themselves. They need to deal directly with their addictive behaviors before they can make progress in therapy. Flavor number 8, the last one. I'm a rock, I'm an island. This category is similar to the previous one, but there's a slight difference. They're closed off even to a connection to pets, and they don't like rescuing people. They don't need anybody. They don't even need false intimacy. They really hardly need sex. It's very difficult to have a relationship with somebody like this. These are people who never go home for Christmas. If they do have hobbies, they don't include other people. They can either be codependent or counterdependent, although this is more of a counterdependent trait. These folks are disconnected even from their sexual neediness. To them, if you need something or somebody, and that allows them to control you and possibly hurt you, so the intentional commitment is don't need anybody. Don't set yourself up for being hurt. These people tend never to come to therapy. They don't come in and pour their hearts out to another human being. That would be unacceptable and unsafe form of neediness. To me, this is the saddest flavor going. They don't allow themselves to feel even their own sadness, however. They lose track of their family over the years, and perhaps the saddest thing is there are very few people who attend their funeral. So those are the 8 flavors of counterdependency and codependency. If you haven't joined our YouTube channel, we are Family Tree Counseling, and do that, and you'll be on the list to get lots of videos. We usually make anywhere from 2 to 5 videos a week. Also, I have books on my website on abandonment. I have a book on counterdependency. It's called A Punch in the Mouth from a Friend, written more for male counterdependency. Books on affair recovery and marital issues and the basics of recovery and shame as well. So thank you for watching the video, and God bless.